And we want to welcome to the show the Secretary to the Board of Trustees for the Dunedin Jewish Congregation, Keren Segal. Keren, thanks so much for joining us today. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much for having me, Pat.
Now, the reason we're connecting with you, obviously there's a bigger conversation around what's happening over in Israel and Gaza at the moment. But the reason we're specifically connecting with you, I guess, is twofold. One is because we're a Dunedin-based group and we love speaking to other Dunedin-based groups because, you know, we can show the rest of the country how it's done. In fact, I saw your story being tweeted out by many saying, approving of, like many within the Jewish community saying kind of we stand with this idea as well. So it's lovely to see Dunedin reaching out to the rest of the country, if not the world at times, to maybe show people how it's done. But there was a story in the ODT over the weekend, which we talked about last night, which was one of the marches in support of Palestine. And the Dunedin Jewish Congregation has sent a letter to the Muslim community, to the Palestinian community. Was it directly sent to a specific group? Can you maybe inform us on that?
Yes, it was sent to leaders of the Muslim community in Dunedin. But
Okay.
obviously aiming both at the Muslim community and the Palestinian community in New Zealand.
Gotcha. And this is how the ODT reported it. Talking to Renard Tamini, who was the Palestinian or Palestine Social Network Aotearoa spokeswoman, she said it was good to receive the support of the Dunedin Jewish community as it added another voice to the conversation. It's not just Palestinians standing up for Palestinians, it's also Arabs or Muslims, she said. It's good to hear different voices so people don't think this is a war between Muslims and Jews. Our problem is with Zionists and people who are supporting the genocide. I guess it would be really interesting just to hear the background as to why the group felt the need to do this. We did have a little chat yesterday that you said maybe, I'm not saying it was misrepresented, but maybe there's another context to bring to the letter, which will show people as well that wasn't reported in the news. So we'll just chat about that. Why don't we start with that? Why did you guys feel the need to send this letter out?
Well, we live in Dunedin and we care for our communities in Dunedin. And it's been a painful month, both for Jews and Israelis and both for Palestinians, seeing the horrific attack of Hamas at the beginning of October, on Israeli civilians and the brutal retaliation of the Israeli government on innocent civilians in Gaza. So seeing all of that, we could not keep quiet, and we wanted to send our hand and our message and our care to our friends in the Muslim community in Dunedin.
Were there people from the Dunedin Jewish Congregation on that march in the weekend?
I think as individuals, people attend the march. People are aware politically and see the full picture. And you know, for Jews, standing by morals and caring for minorities and caring for human lives is one of the values as a nation that had suffered so much. Seeing suffering, the lesson that we were taught, at least as a child, I was taught in Israel, that you shouldn't be silent when horrible things happen.
Now, you've sent me a copy of the letter, and if it's okay with you, I'll put this on a link so people can download and read it for themselves. So I've got the letter. You sent this through to me yesterday. The way I read it, it seems the way it was talked about in the weekend is quite similar, is quite accurate. You said yesterday there might be some points of clarification for what you guys put out there and what was said at the march. So I'll get that in a second. But one of the paragraphs I wanted to read to give people the gist of it is this. We all believe that violence will never be the way forward, that everything necessary must be done to preserve human life and to plan together for a future in which all people in the area live in freedom, equality, safety, and prosperity. Which I thought was quite a lovely way to, even though you can read the whole letter, it's not long, but to synopsize the whole letter. Do you want to clear anything up as to the letter, what was sent on behalf of the Jewish congregation in Dunedin, what was reported, and if there's any nuance that you want to bring to this conversation between the two?
Well, I read the report on the ODT and the letter was quoted exactly as it was written. So there is nothing that I should add to it. We share the pain of people suffering, and our letter was presented similarly to the way that we wrote it, and we stand behind our letter.
Okay. Oh, perfect. That's great. What response have you guys, officially the Dunedin Jewish Congregation, had from putting that letter out there publicly?
There have been people who support the letter and were proud of us, saying that this is a brave move to make. not automatically standing beside Israel policies when we see that wrongdoings are happening and when people's lives are being taken on an hourly basis. Obviously, some Israeli people who live in New Zealand and people who are residing currently in Dunedin did not fully understand the intentions of our letter, but they're not members of our congregation. So most of the voices we heard were external voices, members of we're a selected and elected board of trustees. We represent our community.
So it sounds like what you're saying is there was some blowback from some outside voices that aren't necessarily associated with your congregation, although they may be associated with the Israeli or Jewish congregation, or, well, community nationwide.
Yes, and we care for Jewish values, and Israel does not always represent these values the way that we see them. So it's important to differentiate between Israeli policies and what Jewish values are and what Jewish lives are. And
can you expand on that? Where do you see a difference between Jewish values and what the Israeli government is standing for? Could you I have no idea. I'm a novice. I'm a layman. You need to educate me. What's an example of what you classify as the Jewish values versus what the Israeli government is doing?
Sure. Well, it's a big thing to go into. I mean, if you look at the Bible, if you go back to the Bible and religious texts, they're extremely racist in many ways, as we all know. There are some implications to treating someone who is not a Jew or not from your nation justly, but it's not overly, let's say, liberal as we'd like to see things today, as we all know. The Jewish values that I was raised on and upon are the ones that call for respect of all human lives and that no one is superior to another nation. And these are the values that I hold. And the values are that you're part of a community, which is the general community, and Jews are not beyond others. And the Israeli policies in the last 10 years, and extremely so in the last year, have been very, very concerning in this regard, where Judaism in its not its most liberal and open ways had taken over any remaining of democratic values in Israel. And to give one example, in the last few days, Palestinian members of parliament and people who are part of Israeli Palestinians, that means Arabs who have Israeli citizenship living within the borders of Israel, have been arrested for saying things against the war or for empathizing with people who are being hurt in Gaza. An Israeli teacher of civic studies has been arrested for 4 days for showing empathy to the people who are being hurt in Gaza. These are not the Jewish values I was raised about.
I'm interested to talk to you a little bit about and I don't mean the technical difference between a Jewish person and an Israeli, because you don't have to be Israeli to be Jewish. It's a religion. Israeli is like a New Zealander. It's a citizen of the country of Israel, right? But it seems like we're hearing a lot in the media the Israeli position, but people are receiving that as the Jewish position. So therefore, when you criticize the Israeli position, you get labeled an anti-Semite, whereas you're not necessarily criticizing the Jewish position, but what the IDF is doing and what the policies of the Israeli government are doing. Can you speak to that? Is that happening? Do you see that happening? And how do we as a society, those of us who do this kind of commentate, get around the idea of we think we should be able to criticize policy of the Israeli government without being labeled as anti-Semitic?
Pat, I think that's a really important point. And as a world left, we don't want to fall into that pit. There is the Jewish state, which was established, Israel, which was established as a Jewish state, a state for the Jews. There are questions about that. Is that a good thing for us as Jews? But the historical circumstances at the time were the solution that Jews found for the creation of the state. I mean, think of refugees escaping Nazi Germany. This was their understandable solution at a price. There were people at the place. It was not an empty nation as people would like to think. However, being Jewish does not equate with being pro-Zionist or pro-Israeli. There are people who are Jewish who believe in the need of the state of Israel and support its policies, even when it contradicts Jewish values or contradicts their personal values. But being Jewish is something that is separate from being Israeli. And it's a very important emphasis. And I think that Israel is making a lot of its justification for its policies by not allowing any criticism towards Israel. Many years ago, I've been to Germany, and the policies, because of the history, were so careful around anything Israeli. But that goes against Israel's own needs. Israel needs to be at times protected from things that it might do, and being labeled as anti-Semitic whenever there is legitimate criticism is against the values that I want us to hold in this world.
Obviously, everyone's heightened at the moment. So I guess being gracious, you can say you have a bit of, I would have grace for someone who would maybe be, because of the heightened serious nature of the conflict at the moment, might cross that line and get it wrong sometimes. But when we talked yesterday briefly, we kind of, we didn't cover off, because I want to talk about today the difference between perhaps your position as the secretary of the Jewish congregation and maybe positions of Israeli citizens. Do you yourself have any kind of conflict or nuance difference between what the official word is that we guys are talking about and what your personal beliefs and views are?
No, I stand behind the letter that we wrote, and I think we're reaching out and we care, and being human for me is above everything. Even when there are evil things happening, we need to be humane. We need to care for each other. Religiosity, ethnicity, gender, race, gender preferences, they should not stand in the way of our care and empathy to others.
Where do you think Israel, Gaza, IDF, Hamas, civilians of Israel, civilians of Gaza, where do we go from here? What do you think should happen? What's the next step? Like if I handed you the magic wand to wave, what would be the next thing that happens?
I think talking instead of brutally killing. I think we need to talk, and we've been needing to talk for many, many years. Unfortunately, the current Israeli leadership has not reached a hand to talk to anyone on the other side for many years, and there's been many initiatives. I'm not a historian nor a political scientist, but I have not seen any attempt to do that. We need to talk. We need to stop what is happening. We need to stop this war. It's absolutely horrific.
Last question. Why do you think, and look, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, but it feels to me like your perspective from within the Jewish community is not really being heard on mainstream media. We are hearing a fair amount of perspective, which would say, if I can put it this way, would align perhaps with the Israeli government's position, representing the Jewish community on mainstream media. Why are the alternative Jewish voices? Why are you guys? Why aren't your voices being heard as commentators and commentary on mainstream media in New Zealand? Do you have any ideas around that?
I think there is a lot of fear from being labeled as anti-Semitic, just because of what we spoke of earlier, and people fear being, direct about what Israel is doing. There's a lot of diplomatic, maybe uneasiness, but there's a general fear to say clearly what is right and what is wrong. And I think it's our call to say what is wrong when it's wrong. And I would be happy to hear more voices such as our voice. And I think people are just afraid to express it, or other people might be holding the same views as what's happening now in Gaza, and allowing this kind of attacks to happen.
Do you get the sense, because you're saying you'd like to hear more of views like yourself, do you get the sense within the Jewish community, I guess I'm talking bigger than just the Dunedin Jewish community, that you're the anomaly or you're the rule? So is your view more commonly heard within the Jewish communities, or is it more the, standing by the Israeli government, supporting what they're saying? Is one of those more prevalent within the Jewish community than the other?
It's really hard for me to say. I think there are a lot of different voices. We've received a lot of encouragement from other communities. I think the traditional, clear, automatic, expected support for Israel might be changing a bit. I think I'm hearing new voices that are more critical and are allowing themselves to talk truly and frankly about what's happening, about the rights of Palestinian, about the end of occupation, talking about post-colonial theories in that relationship. We should be frank and talk about these things. It's part of our it's part of our morality in this world. So I hear different voices. There are obviously the conservative voices and the voices of fear and, fear of anti-Semitism, which is it's legitimate. A lot of what goes behind the scene is a lot of fear, I think. And I'm empathetic to that, but I think we should look beyond fear and look at life and look at the future and look at people's lives lost. Any person who's hurt is a loss for us. Every Gazan civilian that is hurt could have been part of the potential for the success of that region. And my heart is broken from that as well.
I think that's a great place to leave the conversation. Secretary for the Board of Trustees of the Dunedin Jewish Congregation, that is Keren Segal. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciated some wise words and your perspective today.
Thank you very much.